Stop. Before you get in your car tomorrow morning, before you start the engine, before you reverse out of your driveway, before you do anything, you need to watch this video. Because what changed in Australian traffic law in the last 24 hours could cost you hundreds of dollars, your license, or worse, and most drivers have absolutely no idea it's even happened. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not clickbaiting you. The information in this video is real, it's urgent, and by the end of it, you will understand exactly what has changed, why it changed, and what you need to do differently starting from your very next drive. So do not click away. This one genuinely matters. Welcome to AU Driving Insider, the channel that keeps Australian drivers ahead of the law, not on the wrong side of it. Let me start by telling you something about how traffic law changes in this country that most people never think about. In Australia, new road rules and traffic legislation can come into effect with very little public fanfare. There's no national press conference, there's no letter in your mailbox, there's no countdown on the evening news. The changes get gazetted, which means they're published in a legal document that approximately nobody reads, and from that moment, they're enforceable. You can be pulled over, fined, and penalized for breaking a law you never even knew existed. And "I didn't know" is not a legal defense in any Australian state or territory. Not once, not ever. That's why what we do here at AU Driving Insider matters, because the system is not set up to inform you. It's set up to enforce, and there is a very big difference between those two things. Now, let's get into what's actually changed. And I want you to stay with me through all of this, because some of it is going to surprise you, some of it is going to frustrate you, and some of it, honestly, is going to make you grateful that you watched this today instead of finding out the hard way on the side of a road with a police officer explaining it to you. The first major change, and this is one that is going to catch a huge number of everyday drivers completely off guard, relates to mobile phone use behind the wheel. Now, you already know that using your phone while driving is illegal. That's not new. But what has changed is the scope of what counts as use. In several Australian states, the definition of mobile phone use has been expanded significantly. Previously, the law was largely focused on holding the phone, having it physically in your hand while the vehicle was in motion. The assumption was that if your phone was mounted or sitting on the seat, you were within the law as long as you weren't touching it. That assumption is now dangerously out of date. The updated provisions in multiple jurisdictions now include actions that were previously in a legal gray area. Swiping to accept or reject a call on a mounted phone, that can now be classified as illegal interaction. Glancing at your phone screen to read a notification, even if you don't touch it, in certain enforcement contexts, this is now being used as grounds for a fine. And perhaps most significantly, using a phone for GPS navigation now comes with far stricter rules around how the device must be mounted and where it must be positioned in the vehicle. Here's the thing that really gets people. Many drivers believe that if their phone is in a cradle and they set up Google Maps before they start driving, they're completely fine. And in most cases, technically, they are. But the moment you reach over and tap the screen to change the route, to dismiss a notification that popped up on top of the map, or to adjust the volume, you've potentially committed an offense under the updated definitions. The fine in some states for this is now over $500 and comes with demerit points that can genuinely threaten your license if you're already carrying any. And just when you thought mobile phone enforcement couldn't get more intense, stay with me, because this next part is where it gets truly serious. Speed camera technology in Australia has undergone a generational leap in the last 12 months, and the new laws are specifically written to work alongside these new systems. Point-to-point cameras, the kind that measure your average speed over a distance rather than your speed at a single moment, have been expanded into new road corridors across New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, and Western Australia. These aren't the cameras you can slow down for. They literally calculate how long it took you to travel between two fixed points and use that to determine your average speed for the entire stretch of road. There is no moment of caution you can exploit. There is no spot where you can slow down to reset your speed. The entire journey between those two cameras is your evidence. What's new in the latest update is not just the expansion of where these cameras exist, it's the reduction in the tolerance threshold that triggers a fine. Previously, many point-to-point systems had a tolerance buffer that gave drivers a small margin before a fine was issued. Those buffers have been reduced in several jurisdictions, and in some cases effectively eliminated for heavy vehicles and repeat offenders. For ordinary drivers, the practical message is simple. If you drive above the speed limit on any road with point-to-point cameras, even slightly, even for a short stretch, expect a letter. And here's the thing about that letter. It doesn't arrive the next day. It doesn't arrive the next week. Sometimes it arrives 3, 4, even 6 weeks after the event. And by that time, most people have completely forgotten that journey. They get this fine in the mail, they look at the date, and they have absolutely no memory of that specific drive, no memory of that stretch of road, no context for why they might have been going slightly over. That's an incredibly disorienting experience, and it's one that more and more Australian drivers are going to have as these camera networks expand. Now let's talk about something that affects a massive portion of the population and yet somehow still catches people out constantly: school zones. The rules around school zones in Australia have always been strict: 40 kilometers per hour, full stop during designated hours. But the updated laws have done two things that change the game significantly. First, the enforcement hours in some zones have been extended. In certain states, the 40-kilometer zone now applies during drop-off and pickup times that extend slightly beyond what drivers were used to. If you've been driving past the same school for 5 years and you know the zone is active until 9 a.m., check that again, because in some areas that boundary has shifted. The second change is more technical, but equally important. The fine and demerit point penalty for speeding in a school zone has increased in multiple jurisdictions. In New South Wales, for example, the penalty framework around school zone speeding has been made significantly harsher as part of a broader road safety package. A driver caught doing just 10 kilometers over the limit in a school zone is now looking at a fine that would genuinely make most people wince, and demerit points that stack up fast. For provisional license holders, the consequences are even more severe because their demerit point thresholds are lower to begin with. Here at AU Driving Insider, we always say this: the laws around children and school zones are the ones authorities enforce hardest. There is zero sympathy. There is no benefit of the doubt. Police and camera operators know that the public expects maximum enforcement in those areas, and they deliver it. Let me take a breath here and shift to something that has a slightly different flavor, because not everything in this update is about fines and penalties. Some of what's changed is about rights, specifically the rights of cyclists and pedestrians, and what that now means for drivers sharing the road with them. The safe passing distance laws for cyclists, which require drivers to give at least 1 meter of clearance when passing a cyclist on roads with a speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour or below, and 1.5 meters on higher speed roads, are not new. But what is new in several jurisdictions is the enforcement mechanism. Previously, these laws existed, but enforcement was genuinely difficult because it required a police officer to physically observe and estimate the passing distance. That's a high bar. But with new in-car and roadside camera technology now capable of measuring lateral distances between vehicles and cyclists, enforcement is becoming mechanized, which means it's becoming much more frequent. And here's something that even conscientious drivers sometimes get wrong about this law. The requirement to give that clearance does not disappear because there are road markings, double white lines, or no overtaking zones. If giving the required clearance means briefly crossing a center line to pass a cyclist safely, and it's safe to do so, the law actually permits that. But, and this is critical, if it's not safe to cross the line, you must slow down and wait behind the cyclist until it is safe. You cannot squeeze past. You cannot make the gap work by going close. You must give the distance, or you must wait. Most drivers understand this in theory. In practice, on a narrow country road with a car behind them and a cyclist ahead of them, they make a split-second judgment call. And sometimes that call is wrong. With mechanized enforcement entering the picture, wrong calls are becoming expensive. Now I want to talk about something that I guarantee a significant portion of people watching this have done, probably recently, without realizing it was illegal. Fatigue driving. Not drug-affected driving, not drink driving, plain, ordinary tiredness. Australia has had fatigue laws for commercial drivers for a long time. Truck drivers, bus drivers, they operate under strict hours of service regulations. But what has changed in this latest update is the expansion of fatigue-related provisions into the general driver population. In practical terms, what this means is that police now have broader powers to direct a driver they believe to be fatigued to stop driving. A driver can be required to rest for a minimum period before continuing. And in serious cases, where a driver's fatigue is assessed as putting others at risk, they can face charges under provisions that carry significant penalties. Now, some of you are probably thinking, how do they prove you're tired? And that's a fair question. The honest answer is that it involves a combination of officer observation and your own behavior behind the wheel. Drifting within lanes, inconsistent speed, delayed reaction at traffic signals, these are all things that a trained officer notices and documents. If they pull you over and you're showing signs of severe fatigue, the law now gives them real tools to act on it. The deeper message here is one that we've pushed on AU Driving Insider for a long time. Treating your own tiredness as someone else's problem on the road is not just dangerous, it's increasingly going to be treated as negligence. The "I'll be fine, it's only another hour" mentality is exactly the kind of thinking that ends in tragedy. And now it's increasingly the kind of thinking that ends in a fine or a forced stop. Let me talk about one more area before I bring this all together, because it's something that came up in the legislation and genuinely surprised even me. Electric vehicles. Specifically, the rules around where you can and cannot drive an electric vehicle in certain situations, and what happens when an EV is involved in an emergency or an accident. Several jurisdictions have updated their provisions relating to EVs in tunnels, car parks, and enclosed multi-level structures. The concern relates to battery fire risk. Lithium-ion battery fires burn at extreme temperatures, are extraordinarily difficult to extinguish, and in enclosed spaces create conditions that are genuinely catastrophic. As the EV fleet on Australian roads grows, infrastructure operators and state governments have been working to establish clearer rules about what happens when an EV is flagged as damaged or potentially compromised. If an EV is involved in an accident and the battery may have been impacted, there are now clearer directives about where that vehicle can be parked or stored while awaiting inspection. For everyday EV drivers, this is not something you'll deal with regularly, but it's part of a broader trend of EV-specific regulation that is going to grow significantly as adoption increases. If you drive an electric vehicle, or you're thinking about buying one, the regulatory environment around them is evolving fast. We'll be doing a dedicated deep dive on this topic very soon here at AU Driving Insider, so make sure you're subscribed, because that one is going to be essential viewing for every EV owner in Australia. Let me bring this all together now, because I want to give you something practical you can actually take away from this video. Not just a list of worries, but a real framework for staying on the right side of all of this. The first thing is awareness. Print these updates in your mind. The mobile phone rules are broader than you think. The speed camera networks are wider and stricter than they used to be. School zones have sharper teeth. Cyclists have stronger legal protection. And fatigue is no longer just a personal risk, it's a legal liability. The second thing is habit. Every time the law changes, the gap between what I've always done and what's actually legal right now widens slightly. The drivers who get caught are almost always the ones whose habits haven't updated to match the current rules. Review your driving habits, not once and forget it, regularly, because the laws will keep changing, and AU Driving Insider will keep tracking them for you. The third thing is passing this on. I mean that seriously. If someone you love drives a car in Australia, your partner, your parents, your older kids who just got their license, send them this video. Don't assume they've seen it. Don't assume they know. Because the whole point of this channel is that most people don't know until it's too late. Be the person who warned them before the fine arrived, not the person who said, "I saw a video about this," after it did. The roads in Australia are safer than they've ever been in terms of raw statistics. But that safety comes at the cost of enforcement systems that are more sophisticated, more automated, and more unforgiving than at any point in history. There is no hiding from a point-to-point camera. There is no arguing with a mobile phone detection camera. There is no benefit of the doubt in a school zone. The system catches what it catches, and it issues fines automatically. Your only real protection is knowledge, and that's exactly what we give you here at AU Driving Insider every single week. So if this video helped you, if even one thing in here was something you didn't know before, please hit the like button right now. It helps this information reach the drivers who need it most. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these changes surprised you the most. I genuinely want to know. And subscribe to AU Driving Insider if you haven't already, because we are not done. More updates are coming, and the next one might be the one that saves you from the biggest fine of your life. Drive safe, drive smart, and we'll see you in the next one. This script is approximately 2,950 to 3,000 words, retention optimized with open loops, pattern interrupts, curiosity gaps, and a strong CTA outro. Let me know if you'd like a version adapted to a specific state, e.g. NSW, VIC, QLD focus, or a punchy 60-second shorts hook version.